Welcome to the Manhattan Project. This is day 24. Jack Bauer would be happy. So tonight I went to go see Birth of the Dragon at the AMC Village 7. I'd never been there before and it was a nice time. Why don't you check out my journey?
So this must be the AM Street Village 7.
For the record, I was the only person in that auditorium. Not surprising, I guess. Anyway, Birth of the Dragon is a story about this infamous fight that took place between Bruce Lee and another Shaolin master who came over from China, Wong Jack Man. The story is sort of shrouded in mystery about why they fought each other and who won, so this story is told from the perspective of one of Bruce Lee's famous students, none other than Steve McQueen, about why that fight happened and sort of adding kung fu elements and biography in. Why don't you take a look at the trailer?
Hey Evan, what could you possibly be expecting when you saw a movie like this?
So I didn't know that much about Birth of the Dragon. I knew that it was about Bruce Lee and about some real life event that happened, and I knew that it was a Blumhouse tilt release, which was very interesting to me because they have been doing, they did Slight and they did Lowriders, like these very specific movies to come out, not necessarily horror movies, and I was wondering, I guess, why they felt like this would be a good project for them. Just before I went to go see the movie, I learned that a character playing Steve McQueen was also going to be in it, so that made me even more curious and excited. Birth of the Dragon is a fascinating mess of a movie, not because it's so bad, but because it's so mediocre that it doesn't quite get into so bad it's good category or fulfill its potential grindhouse dreams. So yeah, let me break down to you exactly how crazy the premise of Birth of the Dragon is. It takes place in San Francisco, 1964. Bruce Lee is not yet the man we know him today. He's not yet an icon, but he's a super ambitious kung fu master who's training people and shooting a movie and trying to get himself on TV or into the film industry, specifically for his kung fu prowess. One of his students is none other than Steve McQueen. In the movie, they call him Steve McKee, but it's obvious it's supposed to be McQueen. He wears a leather jacket. He's from Indiana. He rides a motorcycle. He looks like a movie star. All that good stuff. Then there's a Shaolin master, a real guy named Wong Jack Man, who is really good at the Shaolin tradition of Kung Fu, who comes to America. In the movie, they keep finding different reasons why they might fight each other. Bruce Lee wants to fight him to prove that his more new school of Kung Fu fighting is better. Wong Jack Man claims he doesn't want to fight at all, but you kind of see that he does. And then there's this whole gangster subplot because Chinatown is run by these triads. It's crazy. This movie really feels like it should have been a midnight movie at Toronto International Film Festival or Fantastic Festival. Sorry?
You know it was, right?
It was?
Yeah, Blumhouse picked it up at Toronto last year.
Well, the reason that this movie feels like a midnight movie is because it was a midnight movie. The reason it's not that great is because it doesn't quite go the distance. Some stuff I did like about the movie, I liked some of the weird parallelism where the movie starts where Bruce Lee is shooting a movie where it involves him fighting a bunch of gangsters. Gangsters are, wearing fedoras and stuff like that. And then in this movie, all the gangsters in Chinatown for real wear fedoras, so anytime they fight them, it starts to become a weird intersection between art and life and stuff like that. Especially in the last half hour of the movie, it really fulfills on that promise of going from a movie about Kung Fu to just being straight up a Kung Fu movie. So that was cool. The main thing that drags this movie down is basically the Steve McQueen character. Billy Magnussen is I think the actor's name, and I know that John really liked his performance in Ingrid Goes West, which just by judging on the trailer, he seems to have a lot more of an idea what to do with himself. Here, he's just the most bland, white-ass piece of bread on screen you've ever seen. We're talking Jai Courtney, Taylor Kitsch, all that stuff that just makes you want to snooze off during a movie is what he's doing here. Steve McQueen is one of the most iconic American movie stars of all time. The idea of Steve McQueen and Bruce Lee together should be explosive. Instead, the writers use him as a really, really lame vessel for the audience. So much of his dialogue is very cringeworthy questions like, why don't you do this or why don't you do that? Because he's an outsider, he's really just kind of an idiot asking really silly questions. In addition, he also facilitates a really shallow love plot. Basically, to make the movie have more stakes, in addition to just the new school versus old school kung fu conflict, they add in a gangster subplot, which is that the triads bring over women from China and then use them as like indentured servants or slaves basically in Chinatown, where they can never leave, they can't learn English, they can't, pursue American dreams, any of that stuff. And he falls in love with a girl and wants to rescue her. That romance is just handled really, really poorly. I mean, he sees the girl one time, he's basically in love with her, he wants to rescue her from that life, which is fine as a motivation in general, I guess, but when it's that lazy, it's a shame. So anytime that the movie focused on his character, which is a decent amount, it really slows down the pace of things. The one credit I can give to the movie is they don't turn him into some like crazy kung fu star just because he's studying it. In fact, they use his weaknesses to escalate other tensions so that it can be more of a kung fu movie by Bruce Lee and Wong Jack Man. The other interesting kind of mistake, kind of good thing the movie does is sort of paint Bruce Lee as a villain. We follow as Steve McQueen is being dual taught, sort of going back and forth between the Bruce Lee camp and the Wong Jack Man camp. Wong Jack Man is presented as basically like the greatest kung fu master you can imagine. He's very much the image of, the strong and silent type who meditates, who kung fu is an art form to him. It's about his soul. It's not about fighting or hurting people. And Bruce Lee is just presented as this really ambitious kind of asshole who's super cocky. He just thinks he's the best. He's teaching people kung fu so they can kick ass. He's always like, if someone gives you trouble, you just kick his ass kind of thing. And yes, he gets a character arc to become the more mature version of Bruce Lee that we know from today. But it's such a strong character choice that he's so annoying at the beginning, it's a little hard to focus on him. That being said, I really liked that Wong Jack Man wasn't just necessarily the stock villain coming in. Because we do like Bruce Lee a little bit, and we certainly like Wong Jack Man, it makes their fight have a lot more stakes. You're not necessarily rooting for either one to win or lose, you're just rooting for both of them to get what they want. So as much as I didn't like Steve McQueen, admittedly, all three of those characters get their own version of a character arc, which is pretty impressive. The movie also wins a couple points for sometimes having accuracy. For example, I didn't know that Bruce Lee's grandmother was white, and the fact that plays into a potential controversy about if white people should learn kung fu at all is kind of interesting. Also, I thought for the very low budget, the depiction of Chinatown in the 60s wasn't too bad. I mean, I'm sure they filmed in Vancouver or on a lot of sets, but the product design was there. The cinematography was good enough for the fight scenes, especially the big climactic fight scene kind of went the distance, so I was happy there. The biggest problem, like I said, overall, is Steve McQueen, and that his whole element to it just doesn't let this movie bust out. It should have been quirkier, but instead it has this kind of gee whiz style sense of humor that you expect a kids movie to have. It's almost like they hired someone who normally makes sports movies, Remember the Titans or Miracle. They're like, you're going to make a sports movie, but it's going to be a kung fu movie instead. And that's why we have such sort of pat, straightforward character arcs, why we have such simplistic humor, simplistic start of scenes and the way that they end. The stakes are obvious and clear, and that's a good thing, but also it feels constructed for an audience that's too young to want to watch this movie. I don't think that a 10 or 11-year-old is going to be that interested in this sort of behind-the-scenes, wacky life imitates art thing about Bruce Lee. I'm not saying it needed to be crazy and R-rated, but it didn't feel particularly mature. So if this movie had been a little bit more for adults and had an actor who the role called for him to actually play Steve McQueen, an enigmatic, cool motherfucker who also is friends with Bruce Lee, then we would have had something. That would have been a movie for the ages. As it is, kind of on a scene-by-scene basis, it's, more interesting as opposed to just watchable. On the whole, I would say that Birth of the Dragon is like anything you'd find in a store like Hot Topic. It's kind of this crazy thing. It's like a hat with a big penis on it. But then you realize, you know what? I don't want to buy that. That's not actually the kind of crazy thing that's cool to own. So you don't buy it. I guess it's like a 1.5 out of 4. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. We are the Manhattan Project. We review a new movie every single day, which means that we're going to be back tomorrow, and the next day, and the next day.